going on? It's been a while since I've jumped into one of your spaces.
Got into the new app, Upscroll. Don't know if you heard of it. It's founded by Palestinian that came out of, well, he was working for Oracle and IBM before that. And it's just reached meteoric rise, over 1 million downloads in like a week. It's been around for a few months though. And I just question it because now they're coming up with this, well, I'll call it a regulation type committee that's going to go after things like well, not just free speech, but hate speech and they want to impose other types of rules, regulations, but their main premise was that they were going to be promoting free speech. Buyer beware. I think they're just trying to give people false sense of security, so they post a bunch of crap and then perhaps pay the price later. And they're also based out of Australia, which has pretty stringent anti-Semitism laws as well. So again, users beware. Discussed that. Went through Iran as well, and Trump seems to have a beef with Cuba. I don't know why. What threat do they pose to anyone? It's not like they have much of a standing army. And
It's because
Iran,
Marco Rubio,
yeah, it's Narco Rubio. In
yeah,
Iran, we'll
Marco
see.
Rubio has a beef with the entire Latin America. He had a problem, one with Maduro, one with Cuba. If they don't fall in line, he has an issue. But yeah, no, man. I have heard about Upscrolled. I was actually just reading a tweet that Lucas Gage had written about. I guess they have to put some moderation in. I do think it's important to note that I think they're headquartered out of Australia, if I'm not mistaken,
Yep.
and Australia has some of the most cucked speech laws. As of recently, I think they just passed like some new anti-Semitism laws. Some dude I saw got arrested for saying that they're responsible for mass immigration. Australia is just kind of similar to the UK, has virtually no real free speech laws. So, it is what it is, man. I mean, Upscroll is a valid response to the purchase of TikTok by Larry Ellison and the uh, mafia, and that's what's going on. Um, I think Israel realizes that over the past 3 years, they've done quite a bit of damage to their reputation from an international standpoint, and they understand that the last realm of influence they really have is in the United States, namely within the GOP, and they need to kind of work their way outwards from the GOP home base, where Mark Levin, all these other idiots exist, and they're going to do it by capturing the biggest social media platform that has the hearts and minds of young people, which is TikTok, right? um, the reality is that in the grand scheme of things, when we talk about social media users, especially young people, they're too low IQ to be on Twitter. They don't have the attention span to be on YouTube, and Instagram is kind of the glory days. The main social media platform for young people nowadays is absolutely TikTok, and the Israel lobby and they know that, and they said we need to do about TikTok. Jonathan Greenblatt has been railing about this for 2 years now at this point, and I'm not surprised that they purchased it. I don't know if they could put the genie back in the bottle, but they're absolutely going to try, and they're going to do everything in their power to remove as much criticism as they can when it comes to Israel, because they know that the young people being influenced, well, that's going to create problems for them in the future. The boomers, obviously, they're always going to still be watching Fox News and you know supporting, Trump and this like, oh yeah, Israel's our greatest ally. But the young people are absolutely red pilled on this topic. They're waking up. Even me as a 35-year-old guy, I'm really impressed by how much young people understand, Israel's of this country. My generation, millennials, they're right? And I mean, granted, you can make the excuse back post 9/11, we didn't have social media, we didn't have alternative media. All we had was ABC, CBS, CNN, etc. And we all know what they were saying. They were all pushing the propaganda. We need to go into Iraq. I vividly remember George Bush, giving addressing the United States after the 9/11 attacks. I remember him being at Ground Zero saying, you know, the people that did this, we're gonna, they're gonna hear all of us very soon, right? And it kind of galvanized the country. I haven't seen the United States that united in a very long time, and they use that propaganda and they use that united push to justify a war in the Middle East. And it's only now, 20 plus years later, that people are kind of waking up and realizing that the Iraq War was a lie. We went there for Israel for the most part. Didn't really serve us a benefit whatsoever. Um, Over 1 million people died, to include many U.S. soldiers. And I think this is why they're being so cautious when it comes to war with Iran now. Trump is trying to find a way to justify himself in there, whether it's the protests or the executions or saying they have nuclear weapons or ballistic missile program. Like they keep moving the goalposts to justify some type of war in Iran. And I think a big reason why Trump has been so reluctant about openly going to war with Iran is because, the scars of Iraq are still very visible. And a lot of people don't want an Iraq too. And that's essentially what Iran is. probably with a worse situation because we're talking about a superior military. We're talking about even less forgiving landscape, right? Imagine the Taliban, but with the Afghanistan mountains alongside like an actual real military that has real capabilities. So the Iranian military is no joke, and it would obviously present a very big problem for us militarily. Will we win? Absolutely. But the reality here isn't about winning. It's about, are we willing to deal with the losses that will come from the winning? And I think that's where, Iran is going to try to make it as painful as possible for us to attack them, because they can't beat us militarily. We know that, or Israel. They're just going to have to make it extremely painful, where it's not going to be worth the W for us to engage with them. So we'll see what happens, man. But yeah, Upscrolled is a very valid response to the current censorship that we have, and we saw this coming. When it comes to TikTok, they had to buy it, and yeah, Netanyahu was happy himself to see that they bought it.
Yeah, I just find that you know who controls these algos, especially with iOS and Android, and for it to be able to reach the pinnacle that it has, the number one download, 100 million downloads in a week. That it's almost as if I feel they may have a vested interest. They want to get people on there, provide them with some temporary, false sense of security. So they post a bunch of stuff, and then politics tracking it all. Almost feel it's a trap. So just
Oh yeah,
user
let's
beware.
so check this out. You know what's interesting? Truth, you probably know this, but I'll say this for your audience that might not know this. So a lot of people, complain, talk about TikTok and its invasive community in terms of service, right? Where it collects pretty much everything off of your phone. Now, back in 2020, and I don't know if anyone remembers this, but back in August of 2020, there was talk about getting rid of TikTok back then under Trump one, under the premise that it was Chinese, spyware. They were collecting information on U.S. citizens, etc. And back then, they were talking about getting rid of it for that purpose. But we didn't actually get rid of TikTok until the Israel slash lobby started complaining. So I find it interesting how, like, when it comes to our national security, we didn't take the steps to get rid of it. But when it came to Israel's national security and the narrative, when it comes to the conflict in Gaza, wars all across the Middle East, they were able to get TikTok taken down and at least get it down for 24 hours. That bought them some more time to go ahead and get new ownership. Larry Ellison purchased it, and then bam, the rest is history. Now they're switching the guidelines as we speak. They got Adam Presser as the president. He's over here making protected term, and we know that from this point forward, it's probably become super pro-Israel. And the other interesting thing also is that the head of trust and safety for TikTok is a former Unit 8200 uh, service member, which is absolutely nuts for those that aren't aware. Unit 8200 is basically Israel's equivalent of the NSA. It is the signals intelligence gathering component of the IDF, and they literally intercept messages from different people. And for them to be the ones that are kind of in charge of the trust and safety department is insane. And trust and safety basically is the component that is responsible for banning people, suspensions, demonetizing, whatever it may be. For all these social media platforms, trust and safety typically does all the enforcement. So, yeah, dude, from top down, this thing is a Trojan horse of collecting information, punishing people for having rhetoric that might not align with Israel's now security goals and/or Israel's vision of what they want. And it's no surprise that Upscroll has been, having historic download numbers, given what's going on with TikTok.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I agree with those points. And it's Erica Mendel that was in charge of censorship at TikTok even before Ellison took it over. And they were already imposing really strict rules. They had a regime there that more or less minimized or prevented any type of freedom of speech or criticism of Israel, especially. I mean, they would very quickly nuke your account. Just a little more flexibility on X if you have to compare the
And this
two.
is across all social media platforms too. Like, I need everybody to understand, right? I have like over a million on YouTube, 400K here. Instagram, I've had like 11 accounts, but I'm around 230K. Like, I think it's important, guys, to understand, and I can tell you guys this from experience of being big on a lot of these different platforms. Censorship is a construct. When you look at these trust and safety groups or departments and all of these big tech social media platforms, 9 out of 10 times, if you look at the people that are there, they're or some. If we look at the leadership of like Meta, for example, right? The head of Meta we know is and Facebook is Mark Zuckerberg. Adam Asari of Instagram, Susan Wojcicki for many years, around a decade, she ran YouTube. You know, Now it's Neil Mohan, but he's adopted and kept a lot of the policies when it comes to anti-Semitism and misinformation that Susan Wojcicki had. You look at Google, Sergey Brin, All of these social media platforms have some type of strong representation of members that have some type of affinity to Israel or Zionism or themselves. And censorship, honestly, I truly do think it's a construct, and it's been this way for a very long time. Because I mean, if you look at the Bolshevik Revolution, what was the number one law they made? Oh, you can't be critical of, because they know that's how things start. Once people start noticing patterns, noticing that certain trends or whatever, that becomes an existential crisis for them. So they have to censor. They can't really have a debate. Every time I debate, I've debated at this point hundreds of them, whether it's on college campuses, on different forums. When I'm out in the streets in Miami, and I set up a table and I say, "Hey, prove me wrong. Israel's a parasitic state." These people can't really debate. They just get mad, call me an anti-Semite, say some. They harass me. They try to get me shut down. They try to get my permit pulled. They got me demonetized on YouTube. They honestly can't debate the facts, and this is why they have to resort to censorship. And this is why I'll never shut up, because I know I got the truth on my side. Zionism, and especially the support of Israel. I think now, 3 years removed from what happened on October 7th, I think we can all agree, and the world agrees at this point, that the defense of Israel is an indefensible position. There's really no excuse for their behavior for not just the past 3 years, but even before that, right? And now the world is finally catching up and waking up, and most importantly, the United States is waking up, because for a very long time, the censorship controls in our social media structure and our media has prevented us from seeing what's going on. I remember vividly, man. Like, if you even talked about houses in the West Bank getting bulldozed by the Zionist entity, you would get banned on YouTube for that shit. They would literally ban you if you even said anything about power on YouTube. So the fact that you got people now being able to talk about it fairly openly is a huge 180, right? And obviously the genocide in Gaza has made it where it's an unavoidable topic now. So as much as I make fun of people like a Biker and Kyle Kalinske, and I think that they only deal with the problem from a limited purview because they're too scared to talk about power, they only talk about Zionism, which they're only getting it half right. I still will give them credit because at least they're talking to their normie lefty audience and talking about the problems with Israel. And hopefully their audience won't be and they'll look at, do their own research and figure out that this isn't just a problem. This is a problem. This is embedded into their ideology. It's embedded into their religion. I find it interesting how people like Matt Walsh and Charlie Kirk and a lot of these big right wing political conservatives will come out and say, "Well, Islam is a threat to America," right? They'll say Islam is a demonist religion, blah blah blah. It doesn't identify with, or it doesn't align with American values. Fine. I grew up in a Muslim household. I can see their argument on there, but I find it interesting how they'll talk shit about Islam. They'll talk about how it's not compatible with the West, but they'll never talk about Judaism, right? They will never do that. You guys notice that? All the big right wing prominent conservative talking heads, none of them ever criticize Judaism. I would argue that Judaism is a bigger national security threat, because here's the difference. Muslims have what, 2, 3% representation in the United States, right? They have almost no political power, right? But who does have the political power? We know who has the political power. And not only do they have that political power, they use that political power to advance the interests of a foreign nation that quite literally is based on supremacy. They'll sit there and call themselves a democracy, but if we really look at Israel for what it is, for lack of, sounding like I don't want to sound like a leftist here, but let's just be honest. What is Israel? Israel is an apartheid ethno state. That's literally what it is, right? Where they have to maintain a state that is contingent upon being 80%, if not more, of the population. Israelis love to say, "Oh, we have 2 million Palestinians." Okay, why is it only 2 million though? We know that Palestinians outbreed at a higher rate than the Israelis or the Jews. How's this possible? Well, we know that because they have to maintain a majority state. And as they sit there and say it's a democracy, that's hilarious because they occupy millions of people that don't have a say, right? But if you say these things, or you say these things during debate, they lose their minds and say you're an anti-Semite. But this is all the truth. So I'm just glad that Americans are finally waking up to this problem. And I hope it's not too late. I think at this point, war with Iran is imminent, and we know that the Israelis dragged us into this situation. But we'll see what happens, man.
Yeah, no, I agree with all those points, and I am glad the more